Okay, so this is going on the presentation that I did earlier in the year at ASPA in Toronto, North American Sport Psychology Conference. I learned a lot of interesting things. Not only quite controversial without really trying. Does anybody have any issues at all with Monty Python? We're all happy with Monty Python. Some of you do complete blank faces going, I have no idea what Monty Python is. So I'm hopeful that it's not going to upset too many people. The Life of Brian, which I'm going to refer to quite a lot, is banned in a number of countries and particularly upsets Christian fundamentalists. They pointed out to me. So apologies up front. A couple of bits and bobs that any kind of presentation to do with sports psychology I would start with is the why question. You kind of know the students were always asking why. So why do we play sport? Why is it so important? Why do we dedicate our lives to sport and pursue sport? Now, not everybody gets paid. There are no real obvious values. For anything like you spend most of your life half crippled and smashed with injuries and stuff like that, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But we still do it nonetheless. So that's for you to kind of work out in your own head. So mental toughness, it's the holy grail. As far as sports psychology goes, it's the one big measure. It's been linked to pretty much every variable out there in terms of success in sports, and therefore ensuring that your athletes have mental toughness is seen as really, really important. But that leads to our first really, really difficult question. What is it? So if we go through the definitions, as I'll look at later on, there are a lot of definitions of mental toughness, which means you don't already start alarm bells. You can't find them really easily. Might have some problems measuring it. But the initial work is kind of like the 4 C's model, was basic commitment, control, and challenge, which is hardiness. So the definition suggests that mental toughness is hardiness plus confidence. The psychologists, you might discover that's not necessarily kind of straightforward. Some of the bits and bobs, and you'll notice the highlights stuff around the things I'm going to focus on. So if you've got mental toughness, and you're sociable and outgoing, you can't relax, you have low levels of anxiety, and you're unaffected by competition or adversity. Okay, so you need all of those things. It's something natural, or you might be developing, so they're unsure whether it's state or trait. So again, that's an issue. But you're better than your opponent, you cope better than your opponent, you do better than your opponent, more consistent than your opponent. Okay, so as long as you're better than your opponent, then you're more mentally tough. Going further on, unshakable self-belief. Unique qualities that makes you, again, better than your opponent. Knowing, so there's no doubt, you know that you can cope and you kind of push through all these boundaries of pain and everything else because you're a superhero. The sarcasm is intended, by the way. So it's kind of this collective idea, this our ability to be able to overcome. That's what mental toughness is. Well, some issues that I've got. So I was at the FEPSAC conference last year, and there were a number of presentations, and sat down and worked out there are 23 published definitions of mental toughness. A concept that's so obvious, so measurable, it's so important that we've got 23 different definitions that have emphasis on different components. Which, for those of you kind of like psychometrics and so on, should have a massive alarm bell for you going, well, that's absolutely fucking mad. You can't possibly have 23 definitions of one thing. Just that's nonsense. So hopefully you're kind of with me to start suggesting that there are real issues with using this concept because we don't know what it is. The research is right in the heart of this research. I've openly said that it's a very, very kind of subjective element that we're trying to measure, but our tools aren't really measuring it. Actually coming up with conceptually what it is a problem. It's probably one of the least understood terms actually out there. Again, it's really, really subjective. The problem's really defining it. So if we don't know what it is, and we can't measure it, we can't define it, how on earth can we actually conduct research using this really woolly concept that we don't really know what it is? And that's coming from the authors themselves. Big problem I've got is, and where I come to later on why it's a jangle fallacy, is we're getting to a point where anybody who is successful and better than somebody else, by the definitions within the literature, they are automatically imbued to have mental toughness. If I'm better than my opponent, then by definition, I must have more mental toughness. Really? We're sure about that? If somebody, does better than somebody else in a competition again, are they, by definition, mentally tougher? The underdog versus the superstar? Not so sure on that. And this idea, it's a collection of values, attitudes, emotions, and cognition. Values and emotions and attitudes and cognitions. So what's the most effective tool for measuring all those very, very, very different psychological factors? Well, with great difficulty. That's why they tend to sit in completely different schools of psychology quite often. So yes, it's kind of, if you're going to be really good, then there's no doubts, you're going to be great, you're confident, and you nail it, and you push through no matter what. So for me, in addition, there are a whole host of problems, and that we're using lots of other psychological terms that have definitions, have values, have measures. So mental toughness is then basically an umbrella term that covers resilience and hardness and grit and tenacity. So it's a super term. Which again, for those of you that like your psychometrics would suggest, well, that's can't really do that, but we are somewhere in the literature. The other bit from lived experiences. If you look at Mike Tyson, I think the guy's pretty tough. I wouldn't tell him he's not. Openly said, every time I'm terrified, scared whenever I go into the ring. Well, that doesn't fit with the definitions that we've looked at in terms of mental toughness. Sir Alistair Cook, the kind of closest I think this should call mental toughness. Openly says, I'm not mentally tough. I don't fit that definition. Any of you followed The Edge? I've seen The Edge of the series. Yeah. Not the odd nod. So this looked at how individuals went from the bottom world to the top of the world in quite a quick period of time. They had a lot of support from a number of sports psychologists conducting lots of research in that area. And I often speak to coaches, the athletes were told, this is mental toughness, this is what all the best athletes have, these are the components, this is what you should look like. And then they measured all the athletes once they picked them, and all of the athletes all had those measures. Helping with that. Okay, interesting those who pointed out on The Edge. Of that squad of 15 players, 3 come out with serious mental health problems. There are a couple of others that have admitted it in other areas. So you're looking at the third, 33% of your population having serious mental health issues. From a population, elite male athletes who don't admit to frailties, so there's probably a lot more. Might be argued that's quite a coincidence that we're suggesting that this is the approach to our mentality. We've got mental health problems. Okay, so it's not all it's cracked up to be. So some personal observations again. And so this is the search for the Holy Grail, for those of you out there about the Bible. I think there's some big problems. The athletes themselves are saying they don't have it. If athletes say, oh, I'm terrified, I just have to get on with it. Well, that doesn't fit the definition. If I actually athletes can't possibly make it tough. Well, actually, if you're really anxious and you still do it, I'd argue you're very tough. I'd say that's at the heart of being tough. Being terrified and still doing it. But not according to our definitions. It's linked to our opponents. Our opponents better than us, and by definition, they've got more mental toughness. Nonsense. If I'm vastly superior to my opponent, doesn't mean I'm mentally tougher. I'm not easy as you. Okay, so again, not something that kind of fits. So my personal opinion, the Holy Grail, which we kind of seem to be in sports psychology alluding that mental toughness is, just asking too much for one concept. It's creating patterns of resilience. It's the measurement of all things that complete. It's the measurement of all things successful. It can predict outcomes. It's at the heart of all kind of talent development. What really? One measure is a state and a trait. Psychometrically impossible, but it's a state and a trait at the same time. Really? Well, to me, it's the ultimate jangle fallacy. It is everything, and therefore it correlates with something else. If you make your definition big enough, then you're going to have some measures that correlate, and then that somehow kind of puts yourself in place. So, very good problems. That's a good problem. It's giving people a number, But no, you're not in this. You just went to school in this type of part of the world doing this. You can be a great athlete, you can make it tough, and you're going to have all the rest of it. Sorry, nonsense. Yeah, we'll save that argument for another day, but the long and short of it is, how on earth do you expect to be able to take subjective lived experience and then do stats? So convert it into a number and do stats, and for that to be valid, I'm sorry, that's nonsense. Don't say that, by the way, to North American sports psychologists. They really upset with that comment, as I discovered. So for me, again, if you've seen the film, you'll know why that's very funny. If you haven't seen the film, go see the film. But for me, there are two kind of key things from Brian that are similar here. So firstly, in the film, Jesus is performing the Sermon on the Mount. He's passing on his message of love and goodwill to all humans. Within the crowd, because they can't hear properly. So they start to have this argument about how they've interpreted what the message is. And the point is that they're too busy being right to actually listen to the message. So they end up having a full-on right. This huge fight breaks out, with all these people all claiming to be right. Not what the actual message is, but being right. 23 definitions. The other issue that we've got. So Brian is trying to escape persecution from the Romans. He runs through the town, ends up on a soapbox where other people are presenting. So he starts to give a sermon, just makes stuff up, just until the Romans go past so he's not noticed. And then the Romans disappear, so he jumps down and walks off. But he hasn't finished. He's got to the meaning of life is, and he stops and he walks off, and all these people follow him. Well, what is the meaning of life? I don't know. Just make it all up. No, this guy knows the meaning of life and he won't tell us. So they all start putting the cards bigger and bigger and bigger. And the one says, look, I have no idea what meaning I'm not the Messiah. Only the Messiah, the true Messiah, would say that they're not the Messiah. So even when his own personal evidence says, I am not the Messiah, people still believe it. Our top athletes who supposedly have mental toughness are telling us they don't have mental toughness. And we're saying that, oh, that's clearly humility. Therefore, they must be mentally tough. Sorry, take heed of the message. Now, for me, in 10 minutes, there is an answer. I think what we're looking for is courage. I saw this some really good articles for those interested in sports site from John Corlett, looking at courage as the forgotten virtue. So, definitions. Doesn't that actually sound quite similar to what Mike Tyson was saying in that previous slide? Having the fear, knowing it's there, and then just facing it anyway. Same as Mike Tyson, terrified, but I bite down on my gun shield, and I still go for it. Mandela's doing the same thing. This idea that there's more to courage than just the act of taking on your fears as well. That you do stuff for the greater good. So yeah, it's that last, gasp attempt, you make that, goal-saving tackle across the line. Yeah, you know it's going to hurt you, but you still do it anyway to help your team out. Yeah, that player that's injured and just sees out the last 5 minutes in a great whatever effort. Yeah, that's courage too. So there's something about this moral perspective in kind of courage and why it's so important. Courage also isn't about a lot of the things that we're seeing in the literature. Courage is about taking those small steps. And this is the one thing why I'm a big kind of fan of this perspective is that for me, anybody can be courageous. Anybody at any moment in time can take a courageous step. So I particularly look at existentialism, which is a funny group of people. For those who kind of like your psychology, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, really difficult to read. The philosopher's not psychologist book. There's a lot of talk then about freedom, responsibility. We have ultimate freedom in life. So they talk about this virtue of taking courage, taking on life with courage. Even if the only choice that you have is how you die, you have that option. So Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, again, fantastic read, looks at this. The most important thing in humankind when you've got nothing else is your choices, your options. So be courageous in your life. Authenticity, being who you are. You'll see a lot of extensive talk about being, how we actually be in the world, as opposed to what we think, say, or necessarily do. Existentialists renowned for being quite down a lot, talk about death a lot. But actually, That's the most kind of critical and exciting bit. Knowing that we're going to die, saying, right, we've got a time limit. What do I really want to get out of life? What's really, really important to me? Why am I spending most of my time with this, and this? I don't really care about when this, and this. These are the key important values in my life. These are what I want to do. So kind of take home messages from that. Firstly, anxiety is essential. So going back to our original definitions that tell us to get rid of anxiety. No, anxiety is really important, as is fear. Fear is anxiety that we have a direction or we have a kind of a hold of. Once we know what it is that we fear, we can then take courage. And anyone can take courage. Okay? Rollo May, in this fantastic book, The Courage of Creativity, talks about this idea of to be truly creative and innovative, we have to kill a false fear. It takes courage. We have to put our own identity to it when we come up with something. Just quite often people will create stuff and then not show people. So they're not brave enough to see what it is that I've created. So kind of the inherent need for courage that goes with that. To answer kind of the early questions for me, I was asking you the whys. They're my whys. I don't need mental toughness to take on challenges and be courageous. I have a why. I won't for any one moment tell you that jumping in a Thai boxing ring is pleasant. Having somebody trying to keep the snuff happen at the end is not fun. It hurts. Absolutely love doing it. Why? Well, because it's to do with self-expression, it's to do with identity. It's to do with actually taking on the challenge. To get out of the sand and go, I did that. Bonkers, isn't it? I did it. Okay, and we all have our whys. So if we understand our whys, we can start to have some idea of who we are. We can start to live our passion. We can be courageous. We don't need mental toughness. We don't need little kind of mental skills plans. We don't need, tick the box exercises. We need the real stuff that's actually important and not the stuff that's there. Last 2 minutes. Coaches, what can coaches do? Well, understand that anxiety is really important. Don't hide from it. Vulnerability, really, really important. Praise your athletes when they're vulnerable. When they let you know that they're scared. When they let you know it's a problem. Vulnerability, really, really important mental health as well. When we know, and when we can actually articulate our anxieties, they become straightforward fears that we can tackle head on. That becomes, again, really, really important. We need to work ways with our athletes to help them face their fears, not hide it, not kind of, go do some meditation, go do some mindfulness work. That facing the fears, dealing with it. Well, no, well then that's no good. Okay, practice courage. Small little things, step by step, day by day. Do something that's a little bit more courageous than you've done before. Make that your norm. Make that your working practices. Individuality. Everyone is different. So I've got in a Thai boxing ring in front of over 1,000 people. Assuming for the other guy to beat me up. I love that. I know lots of people who are absolutely terrified to do that though. But I've got a mate that jumps out of planes. Why would you want to jump out of a perfectly good plane? He thinks that's really exciting. Yeah, it's different for different people. So we need to be aware of that. For researchers, a greater focus on individuality, on phenomenology. So look at the individual, look at what's going on, build the answer of that, rather than colour by numbers. Here's a questionnaire, fill it out, you got that score, you fit this category, where you go do these exercises. Sorry, I think that's inhuman. Sorry for computers. Not sure I even do that with cattle, but we seem to do that with sports people because that's unacceptable. And then the strange one I found the hardest when I kind of got into existentialism and this approach in psychology is they don't use numbers and facts. They use things like Romeo and Juliet to pass on a message. How's that evidence? I can even use the Rocky story. What's in Rocky? What's Rocky about? What's about? What's its key characteristics? What are the big things? All Rocky, what does it do? Not right, homework. Homework. You need to watch Rocky. So it's the underdog story. The guy that overcomes all odds and gets through with all kind of toughness and determination, as opposed to his skills and ability. Cut short. Look, basically, there is a message within the story, and it's the message that's the important bit. Whether it's subjective or objective, it's the message, because it's the message that then guides where we go. So it's a call for greater subjectivity and qualitative research around this area, as opposed to our colour by numbers and kind of quantity. And that's me. 21 minutes, almost 20 minutes. Any questions? The references of people have no idea what I'm talking. Chris? Okay.
So, are you saying that toughness doesn't exist?
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's a made-up concept that's trying to carry lots of different concepts into one big bag. So I don't think you can measure it, because it's so many different concepts from different schools of psychology, which require different ways of measuring it. Yeah, there's similar and interesting. I'm doing some work with a guy, Erkut Konto, who's come up with his own definition and questionnaire based on what he calls sports courage, which is interesting because I don't believe there's such thing as sports courage. I think it's just courage used in sport.
Do you foresee the same sort of thing happening?
Less so. Less so. It's about yes, it's about facing fears and taking them on. That's courage. It's for them to identify their fears and take it on. That's what it's about. To work out what it is from that individual's perspective. Because for some, as I said, some people fear some things and other people go, it's beautiful. Yeah. I don't like heights. Not a fan of them at all.
Because quite often in team scenario,
it's the art of coaching. And it's so easy, and Mike gather I hate psychometrics for that very reason. It's so easy to ping out a questionnaire, give somebody a number or a colour code. Oh, I'm a blue, I'm a green, I'm a red, and then go and treat that. Sorry, I think humans are a bit more than that. So yeah, I just think that's just laziness.
Well, yeah, I never encourage yourself.
Particularly in North America. For 3 days, I had people literally walking around pointing at me and scanning, which I've never had before anyway. That was a little bit unnerving. So yeah.
Do you think it changes with age?
Courage, I think it's.
There's a more elders picking up this is the team I used to be able to intimidate with car and mom and the feelings of people, and that's all you experience knowing that I'm thinking that an age, or is it
Nice.
because that being older you can come out of more insecure as well.
Yeah, so to me it's just a comfort zone thing, and it's kind of what do I feel, what my actions about, right, it's there. Can I do that? And some people, it takes a lot of somebody to go. There's one.
I think part of the sheet can find out what it was hard.
And that to me was where the skill is. It's not kind of measuring question. Oh, you're this on this mental toughness scale, don't you? This is not sorry. Right, what is it about this? It could be, well, the physicality. I just don't know anybody. I feel a bit shy. Just keep it going today, don't fancy. Bad day, this bad week. That's an earth one, there's no place for. You can see if there's anything on hold as well. What difference does it make measuring it in your mind? You talk to that. Why do you have to measure it?
Well, you're connected to extension principles. You take the case of teaching, you have a case where it doesn't matter who you are, what it matters is to become who you are, and you understand how you become who you are. So if you're connected with these, then you are in a non, you are in a flux. So you are someone who faces constant challenges. And each time you ask you to be 50% at a certain point, doesn't make much of sense without having a historical perspective. Now, you're facing a situation where you have the last real challenge to face your own death. That will do everything this law, so that will be ready to do that. And if you have to use this in a SPARC framework about how you have to be in a position to be always proactive, have the courage not to go back to any other challenges, not face back. So if you have to do this and you want to search other than just developing a framework within what Nietzsche said and the other extension philosophy that you mentioned, then probably you have to measure something at some point.
I'd still go back to why would you have to measure?
I guess if you think about going into elite talent pathway programs, might be something that national governing bodies might want to be able to quantify.
And I'd still go back to why would you actually want to measure it? It's individual. So today, if me feeling really good to save names, 2 weeks later, when I'm feeling names, I would be certain I get it here. Same as mine here. That's probably not. So I think measuring information perspectives means not. Because although the numbers say the same thing, that egg, this egg, completely different eggs. So numerically giving the same eggs, but the experience and the impact are different. Yeah, so it's you are, so you do what you can possibly do it. 5 hours to do it at a time. And it hits up really, really thick, and you can go and do that same 5 hours as best you possibly can. Those experiences are exactly the same, it's still good, it's still really hard. They might have done that one in 35 minutes and not in 30. The numbers are completely different, the experiences are the same. But I'm a different person. So that I look at the same element goes into the same as twice, but it's not the same element, it's the same. So to me, you don't measure them. You do case studies with looking at impact, looking at qualitative perspectives. So we can kind of repeat progress and see how where people are. But yeah, I can check total needs to measure it. If you're doing everything right, it takes care of itself. Not doing anything right, it doesn't take care of itself. That's what it starts to problem. Measured toughness for a long time, we get lots of mental issues. Measuring isn't helping. Controversial argument against me, I know.
Why I'm sorry, into North America.
Okay, well. Cool, thank you.
Hi everyone, I feel like I'm giant on your screen, so let me share my screen really quickly and then I will crack on. So share that, and then share the screen. There we go. Can everyone see the screen and hear me online? Anyone that can give me a thumbs up virtually or otherwise, yeah, lovely, thank you. So just I'm using a different computer than I expected to use, so my clicker doesn't actually work on my computer, so I'm gonna have to weirdly hold sort of court over here if that's okay. So thank you to the room for coming, thank you online for coming to a presentation that's going to introduce the very, very initial findings for my PhD. These are literally coming out day by day at the moment because I'm going through that data analysis phase. So the working title of my PhD is The Primary Key Subject Leader, Workload and Prioritisation. And the computer's not moving on. There we go. So there are 4 things that I'm going to try and take a look at with you today. The first thing is going to be around my theoretical framework. The second around the quite extensive literature review that I have done. I'll introduce the methodology. However, I have done a SPARC methodology series session on Q methodology before, which some people may have done, so I won't spend sort of a heap of time here. There's a blog post and stuff that I can send you to if you're really interested in what Q methodology is. And then I'll introduce what those final or the initial findings for the presentation are. So the aim of my research, which starts to introduce the theoretical framework, is to use Hall's 3 orders of change to evaluate critically the capability of primary P subject leaders to achieve their role. So essentially, can the people who are charged with administrating and leading PE in primary schools do what they are supposed to be doing? So in order to work out if they can do what they're supposed to be doing, first of all, we have to work out what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So objective 1 of the PhD was to look at the full remit of what primary PE subject leaders should be doing. And then I have looked at 2 other objectives. The first one is, within their current constraints, what do primary P subject leaders prioritise? So when I talk about current constraints, what we are talking about are things like financial constraints, time constraints, expertise, head teachers, organisational culture, things like that. So that's objective 2. And then I wanted to see if, without those resource constraints, so we sort of refer to it ongoing as, in an ideal world, if you had no constraints, how would you prioritise? So I wanted to see whether or not there'd be a difference within those. So let me briefly introduce the theoretical framework. So Hall's 3 orders of change. It sort of says it within the name. Hall's 3 orders of change is all about looking at the extent or the degree of change. And in this instance, in Hall's, it's relating to policy. So the deepest level of change that can happen is around goals. We're looking at the fundamental aims of what policy is hoping to achieve. So change can happen at that really deep level. The second level that we're looking at is change within the instrument, so the tools that are utilised to implement that change. And then the third level, arguably sort of the most superficial or easiest level to change, is at a resource level, so changing settings. So the amount of something that is allocated to a tool. So let's give you an example. So one of the goals of PE is educating the whole child. That's one that comes out. One of the instruments that is currently available to us in PE and school sport is the primary PE and sport premium. A huge, well, now a huge amount of money that is given to primary schools every year to help educate the whole child. The settings used to be from 2013 to 2017, that every school was allocated £8,000 plus £5 per pupil, and now it is £16,000 a year plus £10 per pupil. So a superficial change of the settings, the amount of PE premium that is allocated to help to educate the whole child. Okay, so that's the theoretical frame that we're looking at. So how is that relevant for me? My literature review really helped to work out what these goals are, because in order to work out if a primary PE subject leader can do what they're supposed to be doing, we need to know what they're supposed to be doing, which is part of those aims. The instruments, well, a primary PE subject leader actually is an instrument in this instance. They are a tool that is used to try and implement the aims. And then the settings, in this instance, with the PE subject leader as your instrument, relates to the time, the training, the finance, and everything that is attached to them. So some of those things are going to come up again as we go through. So, brief overview of my literature review. This was to try and solve objective 1, so looking at the full remit. And it was a multi-stage integrative literature review. So 4 stages. Oh God, I've gone all the way to the end, excuse me. Bear with. I never do that. They look really serious online to everyone. There we go. So there we go, 4 stages to the integrative literature review. First of all, scoping review, that helped me to test my database and my search term. That then led to a systematized review of all of the academic literature using 3 different academic databases. There was then a narrative review of the grey literature, so government documents, policy documents related to PE and school sport, evaluations and things like that. And then an ancestry review that looked at the footnotes of the grey literature and like the reference lists from the systematized review. And that pulled together into this, which I don't expect you to be able to read. That is sort of the point. The point of this is to go, there is so much that a primary PE subject leader is supposed to be doing. And at the moment, it's broken down roughly into 4 areas. You can see physical education top left, school sport bottom left, physical activity bottom right, admin and management top right. Admin and management has sort of evolved into enablers and outputs, by the way. Everything's interlinked and there's loads there. And after some thematic analysis of this is where our 7 aims come from. Educating the whole child, raising standards and academic achievement across the whole school, that's not just related to PE. Personal and social development, so we quite often see character building discussed. You can see Harvey smiling at character building. Talent, idea and development, increasing daily physical activity, lifelong participation, and then improvements to health. So that is what one person in a primary school is supposed to be doing. Let's take this through to the methodology then. So Q methodology is a bit of an unusual methodology. Q methodology has not been used, as far as I have found, in PE school sport analysis. It's certainly not been used to look at the PE subject leader role. So I guess thinking Viva, if I've got to justify novelty there, this is sort of a methodological novelty in here. Q methodology is all around trying to objectively study something that is subjective. And there are 3 stages to this. There are 3 sort of separate data collection stages. So the first one is what is called concourse development. I'll go into detail about these in a second. That is analysed using thematic synthesis, a Q-sort, which is using factor analysis, and a post-sort interview and questionnaire, which again goes back to thematic synthesis. So the first stage, concourse development. This is about finding out the totality of subjects. This is, again, going back to objective 1. There are loads of ways you can do this, including literature reviews, interviews, focus groups, consensus development panels, getting opinion from experts, social media, but concourses are not always just verbal. Sometimes they are non-verbal as well. So there are sometimes concourses that involve things like photographs, sound, music, artwork. I, however, used my literature review, and I spoke to small groups of people who have got sort of expertise in this area to help to develop my concourse. So everything I know about what a peer subject leader should do was boiled down to this. And again, I don't expect you to be able to read it, because this is 72 individual tasks or activities that a peer subject leader should be doing within an academic year. Now, some of these they only have to do once a year, so something like applying for credit marks, reporting on their peers for premium budget, but some things are like ongoing throughout the year. They have to do multiple things, so supporting young leaders and things like that. So each sort of different task here has got like different loadings on them, if you like. So key methodology is about sorting things into priority, and all of those 72 tasks are sorted into this table on a scale of top priority up here at 5, bottom priority down at -5, 1 task, 1 box. We are forcing people to prioritize, compare every single task, go, is this one more important than that one? Yes, no, move them along the table. These are all the tasks, if someone wants to read those in more detail later. And I asked people to do this twice, once according to their current priorities to meet objective 2, and once with their ideal priorities to meet objective 3. And just in case you want to see what that looks like in real life, this is it. People literally have a huge poster in front of them, little bits of cut out paper, shift it around. And this is a photograph of a Q sort when it is finished. Once I've done the Q sort, they do a questionnaire. The questionnaire has got, or my questionnaire specifically, there's a QR code to get to it if you are interested. Ask for the school name. From that, I use that to trawl government databases to find out things like free school meal numbers, SEND numbers, Ofsted ratings, that sort of thing. But I also found out things like how the P subject leader did their training, how long they've been in service, whether or not they are active themselves, children's activity levels and curriculum minutes and things like that. And then the really important element to the interview is this bit. It's justifying what they've put at the top and the bottom of that sort. So you have put task 45 as a +5. That just so happens to be reporting to Ofsted. That one sticks in my head. Justify it. So we've got a whole load of sort data and justifications. The Q sort goes through factor analysis. I'm not going to bore you with the ins and outs of factor analysis, but because Q methodology uses Q factor analysis, not R factor analysis, there is a specialist system online called KenQ that I've used to do this. It spits out correlation matrices, factor score rankings, Z scores, distinction statements, consensus statements, things that draw groups of P subject leaders together who have sorted their Q sorts in similar ways. And the factor analysis draws people into groups or separates people into groups where they've sorted very differently. So what we've ended up with is 47 people going into the mix, 47 individual people going into the factor analysis, then different numbers of groups coming out of the factor analysis, all according to how they prioritize. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. Okay. There's some other analysis in there. What I've done is I've broken the full data set of 47 down into smaller groups. So I'm comparing things like how long the PE subject leaders have been in service. I'll show you some of that data. Basically, all of the individualized questions that I asked on that questionnaire, I've used to segment and to see if there's any sort of contrasts and huge differences according to those lines. And again, some of that will be described. And some of the information is going to be shown to you in graphs, some will be thematic analysis, but I'm going to scoot over that just so I can get to the findings. So, first, let me tell you about who the PE subject leaders are. So there were 47 PE subject leaders who agreed to take part in this data analysis. 19 were male, 28 were female, no one identified as another gender other than those two. In terms of where they were located, we had 33 in the north, 14 in the south. I had a really nice summer last year traveling the country and going to visit these people because the Q methodology is sort of much nicer done in person and it can be done online. There are 43 urban schools in there, 3 rural schools and 1 coastal school. And in terms of leadership level, 13% of the primary PE subject leaders are a senior leadership level, 38 at a middle leader level, and 49% as an other, which potentially means no real official leadership level, which also potentially means them not being financially rewarded for their role as a subject leader, which is probably a different conversation altogether, but it is interesting that nearly 50% of our leaders have no official leadership level in there. Our PE subject leaders went from anywhere between 0 years as a qualified teacher up to 39 years as a qualified teacher. 4 of our subject leaders were not qualified at all. They were high-level teaching assistants. And we had anywhere between about 6 months as a subject leader and 15 years as a subject leader. And then when we asked who regularly teaches PE in your school, most schools have a mix. There are 11 schools who are ploughing on with just classroom teachers teaching their PE lessons, 4 where the PE subject leader teaches everything. 1 school brings in an external specialist. 1 school uses coaches entirely. According to the primary PE and sport premium, some of those are not acceptable. In terms of minutes of curriculum PE, there is a strong guideline of 120 minutes of PE in schools every week. The majority of our schools are reaching that, but there is some concern down at the bottom. There's 1 school, 1 key stage 1, who have only got 60 minutes. And I did think it was interesting to look at whether or not PE subject leaders themselves were active, and the majority of PE subject leaders don't meet the CMO guidelines for physical activity themselves. There were quite a few that the majority didn't. So that's all of the identifying data to just introduce you to who our primary PE subject leaders are and what sort of environments they're working in. This is where we sort of hit the main data around how they prioritise. So in the current priorities, there were 47 participants. In the ideal section, there are 46. There was 1 sort that didn't save, or that I sort of the file got corrupted, so I haven't got I've only got 47 for the current, 46 for the ideal. So going through factor analysis, this was taken into 3 distinct groups. So they're called factors because they go through factor analysis. And this is what they look like. So factor 1, group 1, their top priority is to plan and manage the PE and sport premium. So that is the money that comes into school. They absolutely do not prioritise virtual competition. Virtual competition came in with COVID, and for some schools, it looks like it is potentially going out post-COVID. Factor 2 are really highly prioritising, making sure they have got a broad and balanced curriculum. They are not prioritising transition activities between primary schools and secondary schools. And factor 3, the same as factor 1 in their top priority, are prioritising their budget, but different to factor 1, they do not prioritise Ofsted. And that is very unusual compared to the other factors, because factor 1 and factor 2 had Ofsted as one of their top priorities. I think they were like priority 4 and priority 6. So this prepare for Ofsted being right down in the bottom is what really set factor 3 apart in this instance. To get some of the qualitative data out here, the main similarities between factor 1 and factor 3 is obviously that plan and manage their sport budget. But there were also things around the recruitment of external providers that were non-priorities, real non-priorities. Both of them had that as their priority 71 out of 72. So they do not deal with external providers. And I've got more qualitative data to explain that in a second, so just hold fire. The biggest distinctions between factors 1 and 3, so things that are different, were Ofsted, so ranked 3 for factor 1, 72 for factor 3, so 72 out of 72. For curriculum design, factor 1 ranked it 5th highest. Curriculum design for factor 3 was sort of ranging middle to bottom at 53. And sport day delivery was really important for factor 1. They loved doing that. Ranked 4, whereas factor 3 put that down at 46. Generally, both factors are very neutral about things around active travel. When I say neutral, what I mean is that the attitude seemed to be like, if I get to it, I get to it. A non-priority tended to be, I am actively choosing not to do this. I don't want to do this. This is not a priority. Whereas the high priorities are, I will do this at the start of my to-do list every single time. In terms of planning and managing the PE budget, the justification for this tended to be things like, I want to make sure it's not wasted, that we get value for money, and to build opportunities for children. And it also tended to be things around making sure that all children are included. So inclusion was very much a priority for PE subject leaders. And in terms of the external agency and recruiting external agencies, both of those ranked them down at 71, but there were 2 reasons why that might be. Not necessarily because a school doesn't have externals, it just might not be the primary PE subject leader's job to deal with them. So the head teacher's already done this. So we have them, but the head teacher's dealt with it. The other attitude was, they shouldn't be here, so we don't have them. That is actually not allowed according to the PE Sport Premium in terms of teaching PE. So yeah, some don't have them, some do. Where they do, the head teacher's potentially already dealt with them. So again, with our full set of data, all 46 participants in there, in an ideal world, the priorities change. There is a much bigger emphasis at the top in terms of well-being, mental health awareness, and making sure we've got the least active groups active. And then down the bottom, we tend to see some of those enablers and outputs that were identified earlier. On the left-hand side, there are things like really looking at physical activity or the health of a child, really child-centered. On the right, there are things like accountability, things that people don't necessarily see impacting their children. And so if we look at the similarities, again, things like wanting to be able to be an advocate for PE come up really highly. So ranked 8th, 5th and 4th. So they want to be able to tell people, so their head teachers, their children, the children's parents, what PE can do for their children, PE responsible activity can do for their children. And they don't want to have to do the recruitment of external agencies. The distinctions between the factors were around things like teaching mental health and wellbeing. Some found that really important. They would really want to do that, so ranked as 1. Others less so. sort of further down in the 50s. Delivering things like outdoor classrooms were ranked sort of 19 top to middle for some at factor 1, right down at the bottom, 67 at factor 3, and then organising sports day again came out as something that was distinctive. And this active travel came out neutral again in the middle. So active travel is not something that schools are actively trying to work on. When it came about mental health being something that was prioritised, people spoke about it being a passion of theirs and sort of wanting it to be the centre of everything they do, therefore wanting to sort of teach it or advocate more for it. And everything around targeting least active groups was really child-centred, the children and their health being the absolute centre or fundamental reason that they're doing what they're doing. These were the real common trends, and I know this is going to be a lot to look at. I'm going to focus initially on the non-priority column, because these 7 things in the current non-priority came up almost exclusively. Almost nothing else came up as a current non-priority. So things around active outdoor classrooms. So we talk a lot about like green prescription, getting kids out into green spaces. And interestingly, outdoor and adventurous activity is on the curriculum. But anything to do with outdoor classrooms, organising it, delivering it, absolutely bottom priority for almost everyone. Primary and secondary transition activities, not a priority. Anything to do with external agencies, not a priority. When we go into when schools were talking, or when the P subject leaders were talking about in their ideal world, all of those 7 things came up again, almost exclusively, and then added to that, don't want to do Ofsted, don't want to talk to governors. They were the real common trends. Things that people did want to do and would want to do are around budgeting. They will do the Ofsted thing because they have to do the Ofsted thing. It's not what they want to do. What they really do want to do in the ideal world is focus on their children, focus on the benefits of PE, focus on their curriculum, and make PE school sport physical activity more inclusive. I've got loads more in terms of sort of breaking that down by individual segment. But what I will do is just sort of pull together these final conclusions. So there are the most similarities with non-priorities, so things that people actively choose not to do. Ofsted is the key outlier there. There are a couple of people who think that Ofsted is really important in the current situation, but when that goes to in their ideal world, Ofsted switches from priority to non-priority. There are the least similarities in priority, particularly current priority. That is where you see sort of like the biggest ranges. And P subject leaders choose to prioritise activities that serve their pupils. If they don't see an impact on their pupils, they will not prioritise it, or they would not want to prioritise it. So I'm going to try and go full circle and link this back to my theoretical framework. So P subject leaders are a tool that uses other tools. So they sit in that instruments level, that second level of the theoretical framework, which may mean they need to be reconceptualized outside of the framework, and rather than be considered an instrument within themselves, be taken outside of that. That's still something that I'm getting my head around with the data and the findings. So that's not thoroughly thought through yet. But the final point here is using that literature review through the concourse development panel, finding 7 different goals for PE is an awful lot. So we are asking primary PE subject leaders to do an awful lot. And they are sandwiched between 72 settings, 72 things that they need to do to complete those 7 goals. So there is so much for them to do. So if the big question is, can they fulfill their roles? The initial findings are pointing towards potentially not, probably not. But it's also potentially pointing to they don't want to do some of this. So yeah, more findings to be given. Any questions? I'm very aware that I talk really fast and there's a lot there. Go on.
Thanks for the presentation. I just want to, can I use your slide and introduce your PhD findings to my students?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to come and do it if you've got a time.
That's brilliant. They will find your findings really, really interesting. So I'll send an email. But so when you talk about resource constraints, I
Yeah.
suppose that there are human constraints, like HR issues and requirements. What sort of constraints?
Yeah, so if I could change one thing about my methodology, I didn't record the conversations that I was having with the primary P subject leaders as they were sorting, which I didn't include it in my ethics application because it's not technically part of what Q methodology is. I would change that. I would absolutely record those conversations because some of them turned into proper agony aunt sessions. It was quite often things like my head teacher won't let me do that. My head teacher and I do not have a good relationship. They don't prioritize that. It's quite often things like parents aren't interested in that. So as well as, to be perfectly frank, the financial element was the easiest thing for them to get over because the majority of these schools had sort of 20 grand a year to work with. But what they didn't have, so with the qualitative statements that came up earlier was, for a primary P subject leader, I don't have a good enough grasp of the curriculum in order to do this, which if anyone should have a grasp of their side of the curriculum should be the P subject leader. So that in itself, that they've not had the training, like we know that P subject leaders only get, well, primary classroom teachers only get about 6 hours of PE training in their PGCE year. A lot of them don't get to do APE or any PE sessions on placement because there's external providers coming in and doing that. So finance is the last constraint for them to think about. It's everything else that's the problem.
So how many of those 47 PE leaders actually come from PE backgrounds? Because I know that some primary schools have PE leaders, but who are actually not PE.
So I do have the data off the top of my head. Don't know. There were at least 3 in there that were previously secondary school PE teachers, so were secondary trained. Which is great because they have a real sort of like love for the subject, but secondary school PE and primary PE are sort of different beasts. And sometimes they took like a secondary sport first mentality to primary PE, which isn't always what is like discussed as best practice. I've got more information about the P subject leader training, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry.
Any more questions? The next one.
Yeah.
When you come about the aims of the meetings, are some of them imposed centrally or locally, by local authorities, or is it just for you to find out with the focus groups and the literature?
Yeah, so those 7 came out through either the literature review, and the way that I came to those, so basically I looked through the literature and looked at all of the different tasks that PE subject leaders were being asked to do, or PE departments were being asked to do, or very much related only to sort of PE, school sport or physical activity. And from them sort of drew them together and what the literature was saying to sort of come to those aims. That was part of it, but the other part was these consensus development panels. So there were around 3, one up north, one in London, one in the south, and each one of those panels had a primary P subject leader, a P network leader, a primary head teacher, and a someone from an active partnership who was looking after children and young people. And their input helped come to those 7 goals as well. So I guess the aim of doing a North London and South was to see if I could get a more broad look rather than just say these four people from the North speak on behalf of everyone. But they will still probably be very, they will come from a place that is localized in those three areas.
Would they all white or and non-white?
In the first 12 people that did those consensus development panel, it was a very white crowd. In the second set, the 47, there were a few key subject leaders from a different ethnic background other than white, but not many, which might, all of the sort of key subject leaders from a different ethnic background were urban. The majority of the schools were urban, but they were definitely in urban schools. Yeah, it was a very white crowd.
I suppose it would be quite difficult to identify which school, how many of the schools are in sort of deprived areas.
So some of the data, go back loads. I've got stuff breaking it down by indices of multiple deprivation. So I've broken it down into 1 to 3, 4 to 7, and 8 to 10 to see if there's any differences there. I've got all the data on free school meals, so that's another one for me to compare. And the other one that I'm going to compare that has sort of maybe some indication of the level of deprivation is where'd it go?
You've got some in the chat as well.
Oh, thank you. Oh, the urban, rural and coastal, but that's a little bit more, what's the word? Yeah. So I've got something in the chat. What would your recommendations for schools be based on these findings? I guess just off these real initial findings, Alison, it would be that they need to maybe pick and prioritize the goals before they pick and prioritize the tasks that they're going to do, because what tasks they do very much sort of like link into which goals they want to reach. So yeah, I think sometimes PE subject leaders are trying to do everything and they can't. Again, within the literature review, most middle leaders, which include primary PE subject leaders, are working 0.5 FTE on top of their role. So they are working 1.5 persons of a job, which is that additional work is unpaid. Lots of primary PE subject leaders don't get any additional financial reward on top of what they're doing within their teaching hours. Most of the primary PE subject leaders are classroom teachers themselves, so as well as having to run the subjects, they're having to run their own classrooms. And so yeah, I think it's prioritize your goal first and then prioritize your tasks on top of that. That is literally 3 o'clock. Cool. All right, I'll stop sharing. Thank you, everyone. Do you want to close down the session or?
Under the circumstances.
Right at the end. Since that is 3 o'clock, obviously everyone feel free to head off. And if you want to catch me, please do so.
Excellent.